Hi, welcome to BilingualWe. It's series number 2. We're talking about building your virtual village, and I'm here with Heather, owner of Books del Sur, and my cohort in crime. I'm Christa Jimenez, the owner of Pura Vida Moms, and we are just here tonight to talk about bilingual families as usual, but we just want to start off by saying that any type of bilingualism is great. And I don't want anyone to forget that. So if you're doing bilingualism only at the dinner table, or if you're speaking your minority language at home all the time with your kids, it runs the gamut, and all of it is really great and supported in this community. So here we are. Hello, Heather.
Hi.
How are you?
It's great to see you.
You too.
Both had a little bit of a break. We've done some traveling and some staycationing. We're revitalized and ready to, I know it's like back to school time almost already, so summer.
I know, but not quite yet. We've got a couple more blissful weeks. When do you go back?
Well, I'm not really sure when I go back. Working on that. But the kids go back in almost 10 days, so.
Oh, wow.
The kids go back in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So
end of summer.
In Wisconsin, we start after Labor Day, and then here in Illinois, most schools start before Labor Day.
Yep, we start before Labor Day too. So, all right, well, let's get to the meat of it. We have tonight we have a really great article for you. We have a preview of Adam Beck's book that you can't find anywhere else. He gave us special permission to preview that tonight. And then we're going to talk a little bit about our bilingual struggles and create a plan for this week of how we can support each other over on our Facebook group. So I'm going to let Heather start off by talking a little bit about our nerdicle for the week.
I love this. Like usually we and this week, ta-da! We get to start with our nerdicle. So
I know.
What I chose for the week is might turn some of you off because it addresses dual language programs, and so you might be feeling like, oh, this is really too schooly and not really applicable to me. So let me tell you why I chose this for us this week, and then what it has to do with us at home, us parents at home. Christa and I were talking about the struggle with using language and how so often it's, especially when our kids get older, the struggle becomes even more intense, and their rejection of the language becomes even more intense. So one of the things that we started talking about was the whole idea of purposeful language. And this is something that dual language teachers and bilingual teachers deal with all the time, because we try and create these false environments, like as if like, no hablo español, or no hablo inglés, solo hablo español. But the kids know, like they see us in the cafeteria talking to the cafeteria lady in English, you know? So they really found us out, and they know when they realize that I use a magical scarf, and with my kindergartners, it goes over really well. Like, oh, I'm going to put on my bufanda mágica y de ahí puedo hablar en español y inglés. And then like after 2 months, they're like, Maestra, that's not really magical, is it? So we try to create all these fake things in our environment to construct language. But really what the deal is, guys, is it's got to be purposeful. And when it stops being purposeful, then the transitions between the two language happens a lot more, or what we like to call, we want to, code switching is not a bad thing at all. There's nothing wrong with code switching. It actually shows some really deep understanding of languages, and code switching means going from one language to another, even within a sentence, possibly within a conversation. And there's nothing wrong with that code switching. However, when code switching is relied upon too much, then what happens is you're not developing your language as much. And so to avoid that, or to really develop language, you want to have purposeful learning. And in Christa and I's conversation earlier, I was saying how purposeful learning is happens at home all the time in our creative environments, right? Like there's an experience, and purposeful learning most often starts with a concrete experience, something that you do. So that is also why it is so important for us to have communities that speak the language that we're trying to teach our child other than English, because our culture is so dominated in English. You want to have communities that are speaking more than English. So you want to create activities that are purposeful and where our kids are using the language of the target language, I'm going to call it. And sometimes, as we talked about in previous episodes, sometimes that may be media, a TV show that you watch. Sometimes that may be going to an event, a cultural event where the language is being spoken all the time, or your friend's house where that language is spoken all the time, or whatever the situation is. You want the target language to be natural and purposeful, meaning that your kids need to speak that language. I am a huge proponent of books, and I use books all the time with Thomas, because language is often the most purposeful way that I can use Spanish in my household, because it's not a natural language in our household. I'm the only one who speaks Spanish, and so I use books all the time as my anchor in my purposeful ways. And the reason I started Books del Sur was for our older kids, so that they would have some engaging books to really want to use their second language with. These conversations we can do in that target language then. So for example, I was telling Christa earlier, if a student reads a book in Spanish, it's really just talk about it in Spanish. And so if they're not reading it in Spanish, then to talk about it in Spanish. So books are a really great example. Any other kind of concrete activity or interaction, media, or a place that you go, those are all situations that create purposeful language. And that's what's really important. And the article talks about that to some extent. And that's why we chose it this week.
Yeah, I love it. I was taking notes while she was talking. That's Heather at her finest. Yeah, and I think that kind of the impetus for this is, I guess it's maybe twofold, right? But one is that it is hard to be a bilingual parent. It doesn't matter if you're if you're in a big city where everybody speaks Spanish, if you're a tiny little town, wherever that is, it is hard because your kids will protest. You have to be exactly on the same page with your partner or your spouse who's raising the kids. It's hard. We know that. And we want to find ways to make it easier on ourselves and on the rest of you in our community. So when we talk about purposeful learning, I wanted to highlight that in the context of Adam Beck's new book. And Adam's going to be on our show in a few weeks. But he reached out to us and we were so excited because he has a huge following over at Bilingual Monkeys. We have used his research as our nerdicles before. And here he is reaching out to us and saying, hey, would you like to read my book and talk about it on your show? And we're going, yes, we can't wait to get our hands on this. So we got to preview Maximize Your Child's Bilingual Abilities. And what really struck me about the way that Adam is raising his kids, well, there's two things. Number one, he's in Hiroshima, Japan, and his wife speaks very little English. His kids are older. They're in high school now. But since birth, he has decided to only speak English to them, which is exhausting. I decided to only speak Spanish to my kids, and it's exhausting. And sometimes it feels easier just to give up and you lose sight of your goal. But Adam has come up with a lot of different ways to help his kids. But I wanted to highlight two of them in particular. The first one is he spends a little bit of time every single day just meditating and quiet and laying out his goals for his kids so that he doesn't lose sight of what he's trying to accomplish. For Adam, that means that he's got quotes that inspire him to do language learning, and he just posts them up around his desk. Super simple. And when I thought about that, I thought, a lot of times the first thing that I do when I get up is check social media and start thinking about looking at my to-do list and what I have to do that day. And then I'm feeling stressed, which then in turn means that I sometimes speak English when if I just slow down a little bit, I would speak Spanish. And so I really took away that little gem of just stopping for a couple of minutes every morning and saying, hey, what are my bilingual goals? What's a quote or an inspiration that will work for me? And how can I put it out there into the universe to ground me every single day? So that was number one. Then he has found throughout different parts of his children's lives, different ways to give them purposeful language. And one that I really loved is he talks about how every single morning at breakfast, while his kids eat, he doesn't eat. He reads to them in English at something that is captivating and age appropriate for them. So he just sits down with his book, and while they're at the breakfast table, he just reads out loud. He doesn't question, he doesn't push it, he doesn't force it. He just reads every single day while they eat breakfast. And that is something that is so simple. But yet we lose sight sometimes of the simple things because we're trying so hard to do it all. We're trying to, get them the right media. We're trying to get them the right books. We're trying to get them this and that and the other thing. And then on top of that, of course, we're people, we're humans. We have careers, we have dreams, we have goals, we have spouses, we have other kids, we have babies. And so he just said, every day at breakfast, I'm just going to read while they eat. And talk about family time and purposeful learning, all of that kind of wrapped into one. They're getting exposure to English before they go off to school. His kids go to school in Japanese. And so he's the sole provider of the English language input. And so that's just one.
So English is the minority language for them, which is the opposite of us. So we want to keep that in mind.
Well, the interesting thing, and I'm going to pose this question in our Facebook group. If you haven't joined it already, you should hop over. But the question that I'm wondering is, for you and I, Heather, we're minority language. So we're speaking Spanish to our kids, even though that isn't our native language. Where he is the minority language is English, but it's his native language. And so I see some of his struggles as trying to find the right content, and the materials living as an expat are kind of the same as what we have, right? It's where do we find the right books? How do we find the right programs? They're not as easily accessible as they would be if we lived in Mexico or Chile or Costa Rica. But he is communicating with his kids in his own native language every day, where I'm not. And I think sometimes that's where I get frustrated, or I get tired, or I feel like, well, it gets less purposeful for me because I'm just trying to do it all the time, when really there are points in the day that I need to switch over to my native language. So anyway, I maybe digressed a little bit into my own story, but I recommend it. And if you can, pick up a copy before he's on the show. He'll be on the show and we'll be taking questions and answers live with him. And so that would be a good opportunity for you to check it out and then ask him questions. He doesn't do things like this very often. So it's a great opportunity to take advantage of.
Christa, will you be posting in the show notes? I love saying that because we're super fancy. Will you be posting in the show notes a link to where people can purchase the book? Can you buy it on Amazon?
I'll have a link, yes. It's my affiliate link. So if you are going to purchase it, go ahead and go to the site and grab it. And I also have...
Please do, people. Put your money where your mouths are. I mean, I don't know what that means, but...
Shameless, but please do support. I also had permission from Adam to screenshot 4 of my favorite pages from the book, and those are available as a free download right on the site, on the show notes. He hasn't released those anywhere else. They'll only be on Pura Vida Mom, so you can go over there and see a little bit of his writing and how it works. He starts out each chapter with a quote that's inspirational to him. Then he explains the background of how he applies the technique and why and how it's played out with his kids. And then at the end, he's just got a little paragraph where he boils it down. It's a 2-sentence summary of exactly what he said, which to me makes it a really easy book to flip through. So I read it, but then I need to go back and say, hey, I wonder what he did when his kids were 10 or when his kids were 15 or when they were 3. And you can flip through and see exactly just the boiled down version. So it's easy to use, I guess, is a really long way that I just said. His book is easy.
Hey,
to use.
Christa, can you tell us, give us four pages that you shared? Are those the 4 pages related to his inspirational quotes and him reading at the breakfast table?
Yes, ma'am. Those are the 4.
Great.
Yep.
So as you were sharing,
Heather,
I'm sure that people noticed that I was looking down, and I wasn't looking at my, great pedicure. I was actually looking at my Pinterest board, and I was looking for my inspirational quotes, because I got to put these on my mirror in the morning, because I don't really look much in the morning, because brushing my hair is like always a challenge, but it is the first place I go. I'm going to put some of my inspirational quotes that I've pinned in Espanol up on the board. And it's so funny. My favorite one is actually from, I'm not sure if I'm going to say his last name correctly, but it's from Eduardo
Galeano.
So he's actually an anti-héroe. So from the Anti-Princess series, their brother series is anti-héroe, and Eduardo is one of them. And his quote is about pequeño gente haciendo pequeño cosas y haciendo una gran diferencia en el mundo. That's a summary of it. I lost my pen already. But that's the one I'm putting up. Doing something little, but it's making a big impact on my son's life. So I hope it does your children too.
So make sure you go over to Bookstelseware Pinterest and follow that board so that we can start. I think it'll be great to just start to make that a group board and pin our most inspirational quotes. I love that idea. I'm also going to say, just personally, but I'm a little bit obsessed with Calle 13. I love their political anti-establishment. I love them. And their latest album, Viral, it's the whole album starts out with it's about a 3-minute reading of Eduardo Galeano speaking about the inception of life and kind of the arc of how the inception, when a baby comes out and crawls into its mother's arms, and that people, when they pass, also just want to be held in those last moments. It's phenomenal. We've been on a Calle 13 kick over here with that album. So I will link that into our Facebook group so that people can just listen. His voice is phenomenal. Is he Puerto Rican, or am I making that up? Do you know?
I don't even know. I don't.
Anyway.
So I don't own the books yet. So after I do, I'll have a lot more information.
Fabulous.
That's the way I'm rolling over. Not because I don't care. It's just busy in the book app. So
yes, we totally understand. So we want to invite you right when this is finished airing. We would love to invite you all to set a goal. Just one tiny goal this week for purposeful use of language, whatever that's going to look like for you. So I'm going to write a little bit about it in the Facebook group, but I'll preview it here now. I've been thinking a lot about Heather and her purposeful reading. And Heather, how you do that really well with Thomas. And what I have, we probably have 500 books around the house. I don't know. People seem to think that now that I'm a stay-at-home mom, I must need things to do with my children. And so they just keep giving me their old cast-offs. And so sometimes I'm really excited, like we just got a bag of clothes that are beautiful. And other times I'm like, what is this? So we probably have 500 or 600 books around here, and we don't end up reading the same books over and over. Like every day it's a new book, and sometimes I'm reading it and I'm going, where did this come from? This is a terrible book. So I'm going to pare down the books this week to just a really nice group of favorite books that are really high quality language input. And then we're going to spend just a little bit extra story time this week just reading some of those favorite books over and over, because I know that it's really important to have purposeful learning, but it's also really important to read the favorite books over and over so that the language, the repetition, repeat to remember happens, and that our children start to produce some of that literary language that they're hearing over and over in Spanish. So my goal this week is pare down the books. And I'll probably go live so you can see the mess of books that we have and how I'm paring them down a little bit in our Facebook group. And then just spending some really intentional time reading with the girls in Spanish. So that's kind of my goal for purposeful language input this week. Have you thought about anything, Heather, that you'd like to do?
Yeah. So one, I already stated it. I want to post my inspirational quotes, and I actually have a really close friend who does motivation Thursday every week, and she posts on Twitter and in Facebook inspirational quote in English. So I can easily follow her and do that for Thursdays. Motivational Thursdays, and with a quote. So I'm going to post a quote on my mirror, and I'm also going to post one on the refrigerator. That's what it's called. And then I love the idea of Adam at breakfast time reading, but I don't think that, like, reading for us, we have our reading time. I think that what I'm going to do actually, and we just did the other day, kind of spur of the moment, but I loved it, is we're going to do singing in the kitchen while I'm getting dinner ready. So, and I will share with you guys, one of my favorite singers who I haven't shared yet in the BilingualWe community is Eileen Seleste. She's just adorable, and her voice is great, and she has the best songs. And she just did, I just did Don Alfredo with her the other day. I don't know if you guys know Don Alfredo, but it's a really, it reminds me of Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes, but it's a little bit more fun because it's like con el dedo, 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 con el mano, mano, mano. So it goes through the different body parts, but it's how Don Alfredo baila. Anyway, I'm not a very good singer, so I'll let Eileen sing. And so those are my two goals: inspirational quotes and dance a little bit more with Eileen Seleste.
Perfect. I'm going to ask two things of you, Heather. One is, can you give me the info for your friend on Twitter so we can follow along? And I can throw those in the show notes. And number two, can you pick one of those weekly quotes and just put it in the Facebook group so that we can all kind of see what's motivating you?
Yes, I would love to do that on Thursdays.
Great.
Because Jennifer does it on Thursdays, so I'm going to do it on Thursdays with her.
I think that sounds great. And I just want to reiterate, like, even just in this moment, we don't plan these talks ahead. We don't try to figure out what we're going to say. Our team just kind of does that when we get together. But we've already generated like 7 or 8. By
team, really, we don't mean our people. We mean each other.
Each other. We are a team.
My virtual assistant doesn't call her virtual assistant because those don't exist. Whereas this is as fancy as it gets over here. So, and our Nerdicle will also be posted in the show notes, so please check that out. And again, the Nerdicle is a little bit nerdy. It goes into a lot more detail about dual language schools and programs. And at some point, we're going to talk more about school programming and those kinds of models, but not today. You right there, Coach?
Correct. Yeah, I'm like having really dry throat right now, and just like, oh. Yes, and I don't want you to poo-poo the Nerdicle too much, because I found it really easy to read. The last 2 pages give really concrete examples of what this type of constructivism learning looks like. And the other thing I would say is that when we're advocating for our kids in schools, which is something we're going to talk about, I think in the next episode, it's really important to be able to understand and speak a little bit of teacher speak as it relates to our children, and say, hey, this is what my bilingual child needs, and this is how I know. And that's why we're here, right? Part of BilingualWe, because we want to educate people about what we as teachers know, and and marry that to what, as parents, we all know about our kids. One thing that it says in this article that I love is that parents know their kids best and know exactly what their learning needs are best. And so I want everyone to have faith in themselves. And this includes me, because a lot of times I just kind of lose the faith, and I'm like, why am I doing this? I could just speak English and everyone could eat bonbons. But as parents, we know what's best for our kids. We know when it's best to push for the minority language. We know when it's best not to. We know when it's best to use electronics, when it's best not to, if a dual language school will work, if not. But what we want for you all is to be armed with the same information that we have as teachers and as through that educational training, knowing that all of our kids at some point are going to be in an educational setting, and us as parents need to advocate for them. And so I think this article is great for parents, even though it wasn't written for parents. So don't poo-poo your article, please.
Good. Well, I mean, sometimes I can get a little jargony, and I don't want to seem elitist in that sense, or isolate anyone. I'm very inclusive, and so I didn't really talk much about the term constructivism, but in summary, constructivist education just means learning from experiences and constructing our knowledge based on what we know and going from there. And I was saying to Christa, it's what we do every day with our children. So, and schools do it also. It's just a shift. It's a much greater shift from the quote unquote traditional education with worksheets and things like that.
Beautiful. So to sum up a little bit, we've just given probably 7 or 8 concrete, tiny things that you can do to be a better bilingual parent this week. We will be talking more and sharing more and engaging more in our Facebook group. I also came up with a great new technology. It's not really, but I figured out how to use YouTube. So when you go over to YouTube, our channel looks beautiful. And there will also be a link right to Pura Vida Mom's show notes in each episode on YouTube. So you can either find the show notes link in our Facebook group, or if you're on YouTube and you're searching us, you can just go right into the liner notes, or you'll see a little white I pop up, like the letter I, not an actual like I. And you can click on that and it'll also take you to our show notes. So while we are on hiatus, Christa learned some new things about technology to make your experience better.
And also, Christa, if people want to join our BilingualWe Facebook group, do they need a password? Do they need a special invitation? Do they need anything?
Yep, just send me $100 and you can be part of it. No, not really. Yeah, it's super simple. It's set up to be open so anyone can view the content, which I actually need to remind everyone about. Anyone can view the content, and you'll just request to be part of the group. And I usually have been approving those requests really quickly. There's also a link directly to it's called the BilingualWe community, no hashtag. So BilingualWe community, and I will have a direct link to that community in our show notes as well. You'll just click where it says Facebook group and it'll take you right there.
Great. Well, I think that's about it for this week's edition. We are like 30 minutes, I think, on the button. So That was our big goal. It was to try and stay focused and stay on task and get started on time. So thanks so much. This has been really fun, and looking forward to next week. We will be talking to Dee Garcia, right?
Yep, we'll talk to Dee Garcia about schools, and she's a powerhouse in dual language and bilingual learning, and a bilingual mom raising her child with her minority language or her second language, just like we are. So super excited to have her. So tune in next week.
I think powerhouse is a great way to describe Dee. Powerhouse. She's rocking it. Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Ciao.